Hello. So a couple of earlier videos I presented a Browning Semi-Auto 22 that I had acquired. Had quite a number of issues with it, needed some attention. Today I'd like to take some time to present my final interpretation of that rifle and point out some of the things I did to get it back into shooting shape. If you watched the earlier videos, you know that this rifle came with a barrel, a factory barrel, that was bad. It was bored off center originally. This gun dates to 1986 and had this problem barrel in it apparently the whole time. So that needed attention. That attention required, of course, a new barrel. That was acquired. There were quite a number of stock issues on the rifle. It was rather beat up. It had been well used for the problems we were having with it getting to line up as far as the sighting equipment. They used the rifle fairly extensively. So I decided to take this rifle and put my interpretation of a classic styling onto a modern rifle using the modern technology to create it, and see if I could try to duplicate a rifle from an earlier generation that has all the technological advantages of a newer production weapon. And this is what I've come up with. Initially I went ahead and refinished the stock, which was rather beat up. I've used a more natural reddish walnut stain in lieu of the very, very dark stain that Browning uses on them. I also removed, of course, that real heavy polyurethane type stock finish, which is nice and shiny and wonderful, but really it's kind of gaudy in my opinion. So I've used a linseed oil finish on this particular version, my version. I've also taken the liberty of thinning the stock, the forend down, into a more classic styling. I really didn't like the original forearm, the large, long beaver tail forearm that they're putting on the rifles and have been basically since about 1954 or 56 when they started bringing them into the United States from Belgium. Never cared for that forearm on this rifle. I thought it would do better with really less wood on the front end of it. It's not necessary to have that much wood out there. It's basically a place to put your hand. And there's no real reason to have that much wood on the forend of the gun. It's a takedown rifle too. That means you're trying to get a more compact and portable package, and having that large lump of walnut sitting out here certainly didn't help. I've taken the liberty of taking it down into a more rounded, more classic early style, turn of the century style, which I really enjoy. And one of the arguments I have with the large beaver tail is that when you take this rifle in the hand, it kind of puts your forend right there underneath that ejection port. And one of the major complaints I hear about these Brownings, and I had it happen to me more than once, is having hot empties ejecting down onto your forearm or your hand, the palm of your hand, rolling down your shirt sleeve if you're wearing a long sleeve shirt. And that does in fact happen. I think that large forend out there has something to do with it. I figured a thinner, shorter forearm would, the type of hold that you use on this particular kind of forearm, would better move your hand out of the way of that happening. And by God, it did. The shooting sessions that I have done with this rifle since its rebuild have proven that. I've not had one empty yet come down and hit me on the wrist or hit me on the hand. Closest I've come is to have a little bit of powder flecking come down onto my wrist down here. So quite pleased with this design. I think Browning really ought to look at doing this to rifles, or at least offering it as an option to people who may want it, because I think it really improves the overall look, the neat trim lines of the rifle, much better than that clump of wood that they're hanging on it now. Another thing I did, this rifle had a really effective but inexpensive Uncle Mike swivel stud back here, and there was nothing up front. The guy just tied a string onto it to carry the rifle. A little more attention should be added to the rifle, and again, in a classic style, I've chose a neck G rear swivel to fit into the buttstock back here. Just again, it provides a little bit more classic lines to the rifle. makes it look a little more period, if you will. And along that same line, I've added a barrel band swivel up here that again, it kind of provides a little bit more classic styling of the early the African and heavy caliber hunting rifles. These were quite popular on guns of the era. Having a forearm like this really it doesn't do well to put a stud out here because it can increase a cracking possibility on the stock. And really, I just don't care for that look either. So a barrel band is really about the best option to use on this particular type of rifle. The only other real things that I did was change the front sight. I was trying to determine if I wanted to change both. I decided to leave the original factory rear sight. I've added a marbles, 410 thousandths, 410 thousandths front with a white ivory bead. More classic styling there. And went ahead and left the rear sight with the original Browning. And I have some shooting videos I'm going to post up at the end of this little review. When I took this rifle out, 100% functional reliability on it. Accuracy was quite acceptable. I mean, this thing is dialed in and centered now. Best part is I centered the sights using a caliper, and they're spot on. I didn't have to move the sights at all for the type of shooting I did. I may have to. It was quite windy the day I shot, so I didn't shoot actually on paper. I was just plinking around a little bit with the gun, see how it was going to work and where it was going to shoot. And yeah, I was quite happy with where it ended up. So there we go. I hope these videos have proven useful to some people that are interested in these guns. I am quite well pleased with them. The more I worked with this gun, the more I've learned to really come to appreciate the Browning 22. I think it was an excellent design that came out at the right era. It was initially introduced in 1914. Production really didn't get going on them until after World War I. So about 1920 they started cranking them out in mass, and they became an instant hit right there and then with people all over Europe. Here in America, these guns were built, basically licensed, built by Remington, known as the Model 24 in the early stages. 24A when they switched to a gun that would take high velocity cartridges in the 1930s. And then later on the gun was modernized a little bit more by Remington and came to be known as the 241 and 241A. And those guns carried down to right after World War II up to about, I believe they produced them until about 1959. In 56, FN started bringing these in under the Browning trademark, and they did so up until 1974. And in 1974, the Japanese firm of Moroku Firearms took over production of this rifle, and they've been making them ever since. So, give you an idea of the longevity of the rifle. It's been out there for 100 years. It's still going strong. The new ones are quite expensive, and these rifles actually have been expensive throughout their whole production period. And people wonder why. I can tell you with some personal experience that they're worth every penny of it. That's why. Plain and simple. Very easy to maintain. Semi-automatics need to be kept clean. This is one of the easiest firearms in a semi-automatic form that I've ever had to deal with as far as cleaning. Extremely easy takedown, extremely easy maintenance. The barrel's easily removed to be cleaned from the breech, so you don't have to worry about wearing out the muzzle, shoving a cleaning rod down from the front. It's just an all-around excellent design. And again, I hope this little primer gives some folks an idea what they may be able to do with their rifle, especially if they have an older one that's been beat up and needs a little bit of attention, and they're maybe thinking about refinishing it, having it refinished, or fixing it up a little bit. This is something, some ideas I hope you might get or glean from this video. Anyway, let's take this thing out to the range and see how it up with 10 rounds, Standard Velocity CCI. We're gonna pop off a few rounds and see how this thing's gonna work. like I got a winner on my hands, a single piece of breast slapping my head. So that's outstanding.